everyone, so as promised, Paul from Four Drive here, introducing the long form video about the Triple Blade Propeller System.
I'm Dominic, as hopefully you'll know by now, about to set up Four Drive Europe.
And this is going to be, as we said, long form video about the Triple Prop. And we've got Anna behind the camera who's going to read out some of the main points to keep us on track, otherwise we will waffle on forever.
It could be a long video anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so why did we build the Triple Prop? I think as you put rightfully in the first video, Dom, I'm always tinkering with developing new things. I think I have an obsession and an insatiable desire to try and squeeze the most out of the smallest possible power package that I can.
Yeah.
I spent a career in optimizing high performance, really high end commercial grade drones, right from little small ones right up to $250,000 machines. And I suppose from doing that for so long, I became obsessed with efficiency, small percentages here and there, and trying to extract the most out of a micro motor and a lithium battery combination.
Yeah. And it makes perfect sense because the whole concept of foil drive is that you're cramming the most amount of power into the smallest, lightest package with the main aim of preserving that pure foiling feeling.
Correct.
And this, like many of the other upgrades that you've done, I'm really excited about. I think it's great.
Yeah. So I think to answer that, it's just that endless progression, desire to push, make things better, enhance, and we also want to keep the systems fresh and current. So people who've owned their Assist Plus for nearly 2 years, right up to someone who's owned it for a month, there's something always new to put on, and like foiling, it never ends. There's always something new, and we're only developing it because it actually has a benefit. We're not developing products just for the sake of products. Not about that, and we won't release it until we're happy with it. You mentioned quite rightfully, there's been a lot of chatter on Facebook about different props and different hubs, and that's great to see the communities always tinkering and playing.
Yeah.
But this is a legitimate foil drive produced enhancement that we've worked on. So
it's not in response to the chatter on the Facebook group. No. This has been going, Paul's been working on this for a long time, and he's been determined not to release it until not only we feel that it's right, but we know the data, the test data that we've got backs up everything that we feel from our riding experience.
Correct.
So we can now say confidently to people, this is what it does, this is how it affects your ride, and would it be right or wrong for you to choose this over the existing twin blade prop?
Exactly. So question number 2, Anna, to keep us on the track.
Okay, so does it produce more thrust?
Good question. So yes, it does produce more thrust. Exactly. That is the simple answer. There's a lot of confusion on the internet about just looking at something for one value.
Yeah.
Does it do this? Well, sure, you can do this, but what does it change over here? So this is a long form video, so I'm allowed my time in the limelight to explain it properly.
You were warned.
The triple bladed prop does produce more thrust. The Four Drive Assist Plus system, which I designed, has been software limited to only allow you to draw a certain amount of power, and that's 1,380 watts. It won't give you anything more than that. Now, with the conventional two-bladed prop, when you pull full throttle, it will give you the full 1,380 watts of power. When you're at a standstill, and once you start moving and you're gliding through the water, the power level decreases a little bit as the motor unloads, and that two-bladed prop can spin at a higher RPM. Again, designed to do that. It's all about efficiency, power to weight, and thermal efficiency of the speed control system. When we add the third blade into the mix, we are changing that whole dynamic. And what we're doing effectively by adding the third blade on one element is we're asking the motor to work harder to spin 50% more propellers, basically. So we've gone from 2 to 3. That request on the motor spin more propellers asks for more power. So yes, it produces more thrust, and we know it does because we've tested it quite a lot. But that does come at the request of slightly more power draw on the battery, because there's no such thing as free energy. Okay, if I'd worked out how to develop free energy, we would be on a 300-foot yacht in the Bahamas. We haven't figured that out yet, and that's why we're sitting on this beach. But yeah, so yes, it does produce more thrust, but it does come at the cost of consuming more power at certain RPM ranges. And we're going to go into that a little bit more into some of the other questions.
I think so, yeah.
But I think that answers that reasonably well.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
It's where the power is as well, because I can certainly notice the low end grunt, that extra torque that it gives you in the low end power zone. But I can also notice a slight reduction in the top speed when you're cruising around. So there's times when this is really useful, and there's times when it might not be. And it depends on your style of riding, as well as your weight, your conditions, your skill level, everything else. So again, I think we're going to talk about that more in a minute.
We do, yeah, we do cover those topics. So
yeah.
Yes, it produces more thrust.
So the next question, how does it affect someone's speed?
Good question. Well, it's like gears on a bike, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we've doing a lot of riding on these two. Again, trying to define everything. And I think we agreed a good analogy is a bit like a bike. The triple blader is like a lower gear on a bike.
Yep.
So like, it gives you more torque, it gives you more low end grunt and push, which is what it's designed to do. It has an extra blade, so it's got technically 50% more propeller to work with. But that does come at the expense of top end speed, because you physically can't spin these propellers through the water as fast as you can the two-bladed. So the speed would drop with your top speed over the surface of the water will drop with a three-blader relative to the two-blader.
Yeah.
And vice versa, two-blader will go faster, but it doesn't produce as much low-end torque.
But do bear in mind that we're not talking about huge differences here.
Yeah.
It's a noticeable difference. It's impossible to put a percentage on it. I think the lighter you are, the more you will feel the effects of the differences between the two. But
Yeah.
for somebody of my weight, 82 kilos, I can definitely notice that the triple blade prop helps me get on foil a little bit easier, and I lose a little bit of top speed.
Yeah.
But it's not a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
Physics is still here, and you can't just have something for nothing. So I think for me, especially with our foiling, we do such a diverse range of activities in the water, we will actually change between hubs
Yep.
to do different things. And you might say, well, give me an example, Paul. So we were downwinding today, we're on prone boards, and what do we need the motor for? We really only need the motor for that quick get up and take off, and we're not going at really high velocities.
Yeah.
So it made sense for us to run the triples because we used it for what it's designed for, low end grunt. And again, we're pushing the envelopes with smaller and smaller boards, and it helps there.
Yeah, the triple just gives you that little bit of an extra punch to get you up on foil, and then we're not using it anymore after that, so the top end speed is irrelevant.
Yeah. Whereas where we use the two bladers is we have a break locally down south where it's technically a beach break, but we're now catching the waves up sometimes nearly a kilometre off the coast. And a kilometre out the back, it is ground swell.
Yeah.
It's not a wave. So it's a large round lump of energy.
Yeah.
And because it's coming in from the ocean, those waves can be moving at 30 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I should say
low,
swell, not wave.
It's
Swell.
wide and
Yeah.
it's very fast moving, and you've
Yeah.
got to match that speed to be able to let the swell or let the foil pick up the energy of the swell so that you're actually riding it. If you don't achieve that speed,
You can't stay
you're
with
just
it.
not going to pick up the swell and be able to ride it.
And I think that's probably the best separation of use cases, those in between. But yeah, two-blader, higher RPM, higher top speed. You can slingshot onto larger rounded swell.
Yeah.
And triple blader, fantastic for low-end grunt, smaller boards and that sort of stuff. But again, I mean, I'm 96 kilos. I'm pushing the weight category fairly high. If you're a lighter person, the two-blade is fine.
Yeah.
Like you can do so much with it. It's not like you're missing out massively. The heavier you are, I think the more this makes a difference.
Yep.
But again, if you are a lightweight rider and you do want more grunt and more torque, you can use it too.
Yeah.
It doesn't preclude anyone or anything. It's just they do slightly different things. But the thing I love the most is we've got all this hardware. We've got boards and wings and masts and fuselages and vans full of stuff. And we can change this one plastic part, or in the case of the triple bladed prop, it's a very special SLS printed hub. With one plastic part and a propeller change, we can change our whole setup.
Yeah, it's that fine tuning, and this
Yeah.
is what we are. I'm going to refer back to what we were saying at the beginning of the video, that Paul's always tinkering and coming up with ideas of how to improve our riding performance. And this is one of those areas where you can fine tune by choosing the triple prop or the twin prop, what's best for the conditions or for the style of riding you want to do. And it's just, it's really
Exactly.
nice to be able to make that choice.
Yeah, so I think that answers that question, and we can
And a
move
bit
on
more
to
probably.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. Can you tell us how it affects battery usage and runtime?
This is one of those questions where there's I think a lot of misconceptions out there in the ether. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Electron here to give the real answer.
Mr. Electron. I should get it like a jumper.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so with the battery, you've got a finite amount of energy. All the battery is a store of electrons, basically. Energy condensed. How you use that energy will determine how efficient the system is. It's a simple way of putting it, I suppose. I promised I wouldn't go on and on about this.
No, please do.
So I'm going to stick to a shorter form, shorter long form.
Okay.
If you're running the two-blader, at my weight, I need to use full throttle and a longer period of time to get my body mass up to speed where the wing can generate sufficient lift to get me and up and out of the water. So it's a time thing. So how much time do I need to go from stationary up to planing speed where the wing can generate excess lift to get on foil? That amount of time relative to how much throttle I'm using will determine how much energy I burn. So how much am I going to take away from that battery to get on foil? With the triple blader, in certain instances, and I think you could say for the majority of the cases, I can quite dramatically shorten my time to foil with this prop setup. And the reason that is because at a heavier end of the spectrum, this gives me more low-end torque, more low-end push, and it gets me up to speed quicker. Now, because it can get me up to speed quicker, I can get on foil earlier. Therefore, I'm consuming less energy to get to that foiling state than as if I was using the two-bladed prop. Now, that's for a zero-speed takeoff, getting to foil and onto a moderate sort of foiling pace, if you will. So, which one uses more battery? It's impossible to say, because the complete converse would be when we're down south trying to bomb onto huge groundswell where we're literally like tucking down, giving it full throttle, trying to minimize drag.
Aerodynamic sort of shape.
Yeah, do the old
into the wind.
Ski, what do we call it? The skiing position where we're like tucking in. We're bombing down, trying to get onto a wave face, and we might need 20 plus seconds of full throttle to slingshot onto these waves. Sometimes I'll end up consuming more energy running the triple bladed prop because I have to run at full throttle for a longer period of time to get up to top end speed.
Yeah.
Whereas this prop, because it spins faster, will produce more top end speed, and I don't need to stay on throttle as long because I'm already at speed.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as this is some magic, ta-da, it solves all things.
Yeah.
It's tuning. At the end of the day, we're tuning here. So
there's a way that you put it to me the other day that if you were to, on one session, just for a whole battery with the twin prop, full throttle, non-stop for the whole battery, well, with both, one after the other, which one would last longer for the battery?
yeah, good question. So you did pose that to me, and that was a good question. If you held throttle, flat out, full throttle on that, that would last longer. This would flatten the battery quicker. And the reason for that is at full speed on foiling pace, this propeller can unload, which means it can be spinning at maximum RPM, and it actually starts to reduce its power request, or uses less power to run at full RPM. This will never fully unload because you've got that extra blade always trying to process water.
Yeah, it's pushing more water through at the same
Pushing
time.
more water through, well, a greater mass of water at a lower velocity, but it never gets to unload. So this will actually flatten your battery quicker if you're just holding it mashed, full throttle. So it can go either way.
Yeah.
And again, we're trying to address some of these misconceptions that have been on Facebook about people, you know, making different parts and advertising them as XYZ. And that's fine. We're stoked that the community loves tinkering and playing with.
Are, you know, trying to improve things.
They're playing with stuff, and that's great. But I feel obliged to make sure that people understand the realities of things, and to give them better knowledge so they can make a better informed decision. So to sum up, I actually use less energy running the triple hub for takeoffs.
Yeah.
Versus the two, predominantly. However, I do end up draining my battery overall slightly quicker with this because, like human nature, I get acclimatized and accustomed to the extra sort of torque and grip, and I find myself putting in less energy and effort in certain instances when I'm on foil, whether that's pumping or trying to link or whatever, because it's just so easy to just drop it back in the water and zip it off it again. And again, this does request a little bit more. So if you're predominantly using this for takeoffs, so as an assist, not what we call our hybrid moding, where we get up with the assist and then we keep using it to keep running your loops. If you use it predominantly as an assist and you've got a shorter takeoff zone, a shorter takeoff time, you'll get more runs out of this.
Easy, It's, to put it in simpler terms, the analogy that I love, it's a lot simpler, is that let's just say you've got a shovel and it's, I don't know, a certain size, and you are shoveling an amount of sand. Now, if you increase the size of your shovel by, you know, an extra 30%, you can shovel more sand with each shovelful, but you're going to do it slower. But in the same time frame, you are going to shovel the same amount of sand whether you've got the smaller or the bigger shovel. Because, as Paul said at the beginning, there's a certain amount of energy in the battery, a certain amount of electrons that can be used. And it doesn't matter whether you use them at top speed or at low end, it really doesn't matter, there's the same amount. Now, this one, you will get a longer run time with the twin blades prop if you're mostly doing higher speeds and longer uses of the motor.
Or if you're lighter too, because if you're lighter, you tend to find yourself in a position where this will get you up no matter what. And therefore you don't fall into the trap of accidentally just asking for more power when you really don't need it. I think that's, and the only reason I cut you off then is because I think that's the delineating factor is this will allow you to ask for more effort from the motor. The motor will give you more thrust. The more thrust you get, the easier it is to get up. but it does come at the expense of you can burn through your power quicker if you misuse it. And that's like anything that you touch with the setup, it will do that. So I think that would be enough to get the question answered well enough. The only thing we didn't touch on is as the battery voltage drops, the RPM of the system drops because it's affected by voltage. The higher the voltage, the faster the motor can spin. The two-bladed prop, like anyone who owns an Assist Plus will know that as you get deeper into the battery's discharge, it loses RPM and it loses overall maximum thrust. Technically, the three-bladed prop can produce more thrust deeper into the discharge cycle because it doesn't need as many RPMs to produce the same amount of thrust. So you will get a more, I suppose you get more useful discharge level, let's put it, depth of discharge out of this because it can ask for more even when the battery's depleted. And the one big caveat is, and we're going to have to put this on the product listing, do not purchase this and e-foil it at 100% throttle constantly and not let off. We have some customers around the world who just love to hold the trigger flat out and just foil around and around and around endlessly until the battery's flat, and that's fine on the two-bladed prop.
That's fine.
But the triple-bladed prop, if you're in a warm climate, warm environment, can ask a little bit too much of the system, and you can put the box into thermal protection mode where it starts reducing RPM and eventually it will just cut off to protect itself from overheating. The reason that happens, like we've discussed, is this asks for more from the motor. It asks for more power and it does not unload at full throttle, which unloading is when the propeller can free spin at full RPMs and it actually reduces its power consumption. This will never unload. So do not e-foil this at 100% throttle indefinitely if you don't want your system to potentially thermal overload. Cooler climates, it probably won't, but don't use it for that. Use your throttle. Just use a little bit less and cool your box down.
Less is more.
Because, yeah, exactly. So I think that's it for question number 3. Moving on.
Okay, great. The next question, are there any other considerations and or characteristics of the blade prop?
Yeah, there is.
There's a few.
Who would have thought? Okay. I think my favorite one, which was unexpected, is the ability to drive the prop semi-submerged. And when I say it's unexpected, I knew it would do what it was going to do, but I was pleasantly surprised at how much better it did it. And what we're referring to is when the water line is semi over the pod or slightly above, slightly below or whatever, but the prop isn't fully submerged in nice clean water flow. Because you've got another entire propeller blade to work with, when you're sucking in air and bubbles, the triple bladed prop has much more opportunity to maintain grip on the water and provide that steady push. Whereas the two-bladed prop, which has to spin faster to achieve the same thrust, if it starts sucking in air, it starts to cavitate and it starts to aerate the water around the propeller blades, which you lose thrust because you're literally boiling water. When you're sucking in bubbles into a propeller that's spinning fast enough, you literally are boiling water on the tip, on the leading edge of the blade. And that's called cavitation, and you lose thrust. And you actually burn energy doing that. So I like being able to surface drive these a bit more, which means, again, the pod and the motor's semi-submerged. And it's sort of like in and out of the water. And it's less, what's the word? It's way quieter.
It's smoother.
And it's smoother.
And it makes a lot of sense because as it rotates, the triple blade prop, there's more props in the water at any one time. There's a greater period of time with no prop in the water with the twin blade props. So there's going to be more opportunity for air to get pulled in. So yeah, as Paul said, for that sort of partially foiling around when the props are constantly coming in and out of the water, reduces cavitation, gives a smoother ride. But I've also really found that it helps because I do a lot of flat water pumping with full drive. And if I'm pumping around and then I come down, pull the trigger, and I do that transition from pumping back to e-foiling.
Yeah.
With the twin blade prop, for the first, I don't know, it could be a split second, it could be a couple of seconds. You get that sort of little wobble as the two props sort of try to grip the water properly.
Yeah.
But with the triple blade prop, it's almost eliminated that. It really is that much smoother, and the transition from pumping to e-foiling is much smoother with the triple prop.
Yeah. And I find it, I also, when I come off the back of a wave and I'm on foil, I actually pre-spool the prop. So I go to about 50% throttle, something like that. Before my motor actually comes back into the water, I know roughly where to have my finger on the trigger. And I find that this just seamlessly sort of transitions into the water and it grips up and I go again. Yeah. There's no surginess or sort of like sort of effect. It sort of transitions in nice and smooth. And that is actually quite, that's a nice feeling.
It's a really nice feeling, yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, this will affect the percentage value on your controller.
Oh yeah.
So, because this spins at a lower RPM relative to the two-blader to produce the same amount of thrust, when you're using your controller, let's say you've been foiling around and you've worked out that at roughly 82% on your controller, you can sustain flight. You're just flying around and you've sort of become acclimatized to approximately that value would equal sustained flight. And then you go and put your triple blader on. And you go, oh my gosh.
That's exactly what I did the first time he gave me the triple prop.
Bursting in the door, I can now do it.
I was going around with a twin blade first of all and cruising around at around about 75% throttle. And then Paul gave me the triple and I was around about 60%. And I came back in, I was just frothing going, this is amazing. I was using so much less power. I'm gonna be able to, go for twice as long or, much longer amount of time on the same battery, and this goes back to the misconceptions that are out there of you're using less throttle, therefore you must gain battery duration. But as the reasons we've said before in the previous question, that is not the case.
Yeah, so it might read like you're using, well, it will read you're using less throttle percentage, but you're consuming roughly the same amount of power. And that's, the controller doesn't know what you're doing. It's just an arbitrary value. So you're going to reach maximum power earlier in the trigger range on a triple blader than you will on the two blader. And so don't kid yourself that all of a sudden you're using a lot less trigger, that all of a sudden something's going to take me an extra 10, 15 minutes. It won't. It's just coming on earlier, and that percentage value, it's not misleading, it's just, it's a different way of reading.
I was that stoked by the lower throttle that I was using that Paul actually had to show me. He pressed the on button. If you press it, is it 3 times?
Press it 3 times. It goes to the amp. You can see how many amps your system is consuming, and it might, someone might splice in a little
and the proof is that running at 75% with the twin prop drew the same amount of amps as running at 60% throttle with the triple prop. So
I crushed your dreams.
I know, I was gutted, but what can you do?
So I think that's another consideration. Really, I think that's about it. It's, I think we've covered a lot of the other ones already. So
the next question, which one do you both prefer to ride with?
I'll let you go first.
We were talking about this before we went on camera.
We've talked about this a lot.
And I suppose if I was stuck on an island and I have to choose one, and there was no postage to send another one, I think I would stay with the triple. And I think the main reason would be because I'm in the heavier weight category, not to define categories, but as I said, I'm 96 kilos. I'm already pushing the power to rate relationship of my system and foil aboard more than someone like yourself. And I value that extra low end grunt. If I was on a big sub, like I used to be primarily, I think I could go either way.
Okay.
But as you and I and the rest of the four-wheel drive crew are pushing way more towards prone stuff now,
Yeah.
smaller boards, much smaller boards, that have considerably less planing area, we never get up to the surface speed that we once did on those big boards. We do eventually, but not initially.
Yeah.
So that extra torque that we get down low really does make it easier for me to progress to those smaller foils and smaller boards all in the same go and still get on foil.
Yeah.
And I actually get a more efficient session because I'm on full throttle less than I would be on the two-blader. And the perfect scenario of that was 3 hours ago when we were out in the ocean.
Oh yeah.
A 20k downwinder. It was effortless to get up.
It really was.
And you're up. And normally I'd be on the throttle a bit longer with the twin.
Yeah.
And over that distance, I mean that distance for me is a pretty long run. I know I would have consumed.
Oh, for sure. I've done that same run before and come in with very little battery power. In fact, twice I've not got to the end because I've run out of battery. Very marginal conditions on one of them.
Yep.
Swell was so small, and the other I was using a foil that was way too small for the conditions.
Yep.
And with the twin blade prop, you're on the throttle for such a long time to get up on foil that you're gonna use the battery up a lot quicker. With the triple blade prop, every time I've used it for a downwinder, I'm constantly surprised at how much percentage remains on the battery by the end of the run. And it's sort of like, it's not just easier, it's a bit of a safety net. So for downwinding, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. The only time I pull it off now is when as we discussed, we're trying to really push the envelope of top speed.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For catching ground swells.
Yeah.
I think ground swells easily 30 k's an hour out
Yeah.
the back, and you're pushing the friendship with trying to get up to those top end speeds with this.
Yeah.
We've had other customers recently come to Four-Wheel Drive HQ over the last few months from all over the world, and they've tried these and they've tried the twos. It's actually funny, some still prefer the two-bladers.
Well, I think a lot of that is which conditions they're in when we take them out to use it, to be honest. Because, again, after my initial euphoria of, wow, this triple prop is amazing, I then didn't want to ride without it. And we were at, was it Goolwa or Middleton Point? And it was that really fast, low ground swell. And I was having real trouble with the triple prop. And we came in to change batteries, and Paul literally took it away from me. He said, nah, go back to using this. And I was like, no, my triple prop. And he made me put the double on. And it was just better. It was so much better. I was catching everything rather than really struggling and missing most of them. So there are times when I will go back to this.
And again, it's important to just remember that is fast moving ground swell.
Yeah.
Big lumpy waves, and the only way you're catching it is to have a higher velocity than the wave.
Yeah. I think also there is, when you're e-foiling, if you love just bombing around at top speed, then I think the twin blade prop is the best option.
It is. Yeah.
And not just for the top speed, because the motor is so far down the mast, or at the bottom of the mast essentially, the lever is longer, so it's going to give you more lift. And what a lot of people find is that with a triple prop, it's so punchy with the low end, and the extra leverage and the lift is greater because the motor is further down. It's so hard to keep the nose of the board down when you're taking off, especially as you go to shorter and shorter boards.
Correct.
So for e-foiling, again, the twin blade prop might well be the best option.
The good thing is we're going to make the hub, it's interchangeable, it's going to be cheap.
Hang on, that's the next question.
I know.
don't go on, because I'm
tunable, so I don't think anyone's going to be truly faced with you're going to have to pick one for the rest of your life.
Nah.
But yeah, I think I vote my favourite is the triple.
And I'm also going to go with if I was forced to choose one, and I would like to cheat and say, it depends on the conditions to which one I would choose, and that is the real answer. But if I was forced to choose one, it would be the triple prop, simply because At the moment, I'm doing a lot more downwinding than I ever have, and for me, that's the area of foiling that I really, really want to do more and more and more of.
Yeah.
In the rare time when I'm in, fast-moving groundswell, if I couldn't have it, then I'd put up with that because, downwinding is my main sort of foiling discipline at the moment.
How can someone get one of these, and why does it come with 2 different sets of bolts?
Right. Well, you'll be able to get the upgrade on the website.
Yep.
And stockists will be stocking them too in due course. So that's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
The way we're going to sell them is slightly different. So we're going to offer the Triple Bladed Hub with 3 propellers as a bolt-on ready to go hub and prop setup.
Yeah, literally just plug and play. You don't have to mess around with changing from your original prop.
The other way we're going to provide it, because we were always committed to trying to keep the costs down, because we do try to do that. We're going to sell the hub, just the hub and 1 propeller, for those people that already own 2 aluminium props, because obviously the kits now come with the aluminium props. So you can get it as a triple prop and a hub, or a hub and 1 prop.
So you have
The reason there is 2 sets of bolts in the kit is because I'm obsessed with tuning stuff.
It's the pursuit of excellence, is what it is.
So we'll splice in an actual photo of this because it's impossible to show on camera, but in a nutshell, the way the propeller hub has to be made to keep it at a certain diameter and the thickness of the side walls where the propeller gets bolted in. Long story short, the normal bolts that go through the prop, if you're using the conventional blue Allen key that comes with the kit, that's a 2.5mm Allen key head. And you can wind them in, easy peasy, and you use it as you would use the bolts on your current hub. However, because of the shape and the design of this, the head of that bolt sticks out about 2.5mm.
I didn't even notice.
About 2mm, and it's about 1/3 of the head of the bolt. It's technically protruding out the circumference of the hub. And they're the type of details that irritate me, and I can't let them go. So we tried to find button head bolts, which is a rounded head bolt as opposed to a square head, that had 2.5mm Allen key heads, and they don't exist. So, and we're not willing to produce a custom-made bolt to scratch my itch. So there's a 2mm Allen key button head bolt that when you do it up, goes all the way into the hub, and then there's absolutely nothing protruding on the surface of the prop hub. Now you might, Paul, what are you rabbiting on about? The only reason I'm doing this is because technically the button head bolt fully recesses into the hub, and you have a smooth surface here, is less hydrodynamic drag, and will produce the tiniest little bit less cavitation of air into the prop when it goes through in and out of the water. So we provide both bolt sets and a 2mm Allen key. You can use whatever one you want. If you find it irritating to have 2 different Allen keys, then just use the normal one. And if you're like me and you can't let that last 1% go, you use the button head bolts and the 2mm Allen key provided. So I think that's enough from us.
Pretty much.
Let us know how you go. We can't wait to introduce it to the world. And as always, get out there and have fun on the water.
All right.